The way we consume and share news today is largely rooted in social media outlets. A reason why we decided it is important to look at what's being discussed online, from the hottest issues to trends, for our daily social media minute. We're joined by Yerika. Good morning.
Good morning.
It is a Wednesday.
Yes.
Thoughts?
Lena and I was just joking before the on-air signal went on. We're just joking that we should all move to Quito. Ecuador.
Manageable temperatures. Pleasantries. It is tough. You know, I hate to blame the weather for everything unpleasant in my life, but I'm going to when it's this humid and hot so early on.
Yeah. I always tell my students, the weather is just the weather. Don't make that become your attitude. But I should probably practice what I preach.
Honestly, who says adults that came before us led by example? It isn't about what we say, not what we do. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Let's jump into our social media minute coverage. As always, some of the buzzwords causing up a really important conversation, it turns out. Even if you're not keeping up with what's happening in the mathematics field, his name is everywhere. So maybe it's about talking about Junha.
Yeah, you talked about him in the headline section, right? Yeah. Everyone's talking about him. Was so excited to see the news yesterday. We covered the fact that he was the first Korean to win a Fields medal. But now, everyone is familiar with who he is, how brilliant he is, his humble nature. I dug a little bit deeper, which wasn't that difficult because there's so many interviews, So I wanted to talk a little bit about who this guy is.
Because you don't see the process, do you? A headline just doesn't do it justice. No. He won this prestigious prize comparable to a Nobel Prize. Just makes us think, wow. And then what? Because there's an entire process and a story behind the human who I'm sure faced his own obstacles along the way. I mean, it's actually really surprising finding bits and pieces of these interviews saying that at one point he didn't really think he could thrive in mathematics.
He had no desire to be a mathematician. It's simple as that. In fact, he was completely indifferent to the subject. He dropped out of high school to become a poet, of all things. I mean, of all professions. I mean, mathematics, literature, poetry.
In the simplest spectrum, we don't really group them into one.
No.
And then we go back to the Renaissance and we go back to where things overlap. And I have friends who pursue mathematics as they're in their careers too. We're not friends anymore. Just kidding. But, they do say, in some sense, math is poetic and beautiful.
Totally.
And I can't level with that, but I'll take their word for it.
Yeah. Well, anyways, that poetic detour has since proved crucial to his breakthroughs, artistry, according to his colleagues, is evident in the way he uncovers those just right objects at the center of his work, and in the way he seeks a deeper significance in everything he does. According to one of his colleagues, he makes things beautiful.
See, I'm telling you, this is how mathematicians describe a beautiful problem-solving experience.
Exactly. And when they found out that he came to mathematics after poetry, they thought, okay, this makes sense to me.
All right, thoughts, folks. Do share, because we're trying to better understand this entire story. I do wonder, what does a typical day in the life of a Fields Medal recipient actually look like?
When I came across this news, I immediately thought of the movie A Beautiful Mind.
Russell Crowe?
Yeah. On any given day, Ho does about 3 hours of focused work. He might think about a math problem or prepare a lecture. He prepares lecture for a classroom of students.
Because he does teach at Princeton, right?
Yes, he does. Or he might schedule a doctor's appointments for his 2 sons.
Life.
He says he's exhausted because what he does, it requires so much focus. It takes away a lot of his energy, he says.
3 hours of focused work at this level, I can't even comprehend what that is. I'm not going to pretend like I understand, but he's balancing a lot of different roles in his life. He's also a father. He mentions in the mix. It's not like he can, drop his father duties because he's, a Fields recipient.
Yeah. He finds that forcing himself to do something or defining a specific goal, even for something he enjoys, it never works. It's particularly difficult for him, he says, to move his attention from one thing to another. And this is what he said, and I found it weirdly comforting. He said, I think intention and willpower are highly overrated. You rarely achieve anything with those things.
I feel like it goes against the DNA of South Korea's education sector, work sector, and this whole power through mantra. But maybe South Korea is not the only one guilty of it. I think the States is extremely similar, for instance. Oh, wow. Can I use that as an excuse when I really cannot work up the willpower to do something? I think intention and willpower are highly overrated. Let's go home, York.
Yeah. This has been the case, though, for him since he was very young. School was excruciating for him. He loved to learn, but he couldn't focus or absorb anything in a classroom setting. Instead, he preferred to read on his own, to explore on his own. In elementary school, for example, he devoured all 10 volumes of an encyclopedia about living things. He was obsessed with exploring a mountain near his family's apartment. So, he wasn't the typical model student that we might expect.
No, in fact, he's quite the opposite. But maybe that's what it takes to really make a big difference or a dent in an entire field. He was born in California to parents who were scholars. But like you said, despite his background, that may have geared him towards maybe all the right resources to pursue higher education. There were chapters of his life where he just could not, sit down and just focus on his school materials.
He avoided math at all costs. So when he was 16 years old and in the middle of his first year in high school, he decided to drop out to write poetry. His plan at the time was to complete his masterpiece in 2 years before he would leave to attend university. Obviously, that plan didn't work out. And when he eventually did enter Seoul National University, he said he felt lost. He felt completely lost for 6 years. He was at the school, and he briefly flirted with the idea of being a science writer. At one point, he decided to major in astronomy and physics. But he was one of those students who frequently skipped classes.
At SNU?
Yeah, and he had to retake several courses. Again, it kind of brings comfort to me in the fact that he had no idea what he wanted to do at that age. I mean, haven't we all been there?
I think it was Michelle Obama who said it's the most useless question to ask children and teenagers. What do you want to be when you grow up? Because it's not like there is one destination. You get there and it's over.
Especially no longer in this day and age.
Absolutely not. I mean, I'm not encouraging a certain behavior to each their own. However, it does seem like we're switching careers more frequently than ever before in history, and it allows that to happen pretty naturally and seamlessly. You're right. The story really weirdly brings me comfort, and I have nothing in common with this guy besides that I skipped classes. I wanted to pursue poetry. Things like that. When did he then discover his love of math, his brilliance in math after all? Because there should be a turning point in the story.
There was. And it was, a Japanese mathematician, his former professor by the name of Heisuke Hironaka, who won the Fields Medal in 1970. He took his class in his 6th year of university, and for the first time, he says he witnessed research mathematics unfolding in real time. And he says he loved the act of trying to do something no one really knew how to do and the freedom that came with not knowing. And his former math tutor, when he was in high school, has said that, this was a kid at the time. He wasn't good at mathematics in the typical sense where he solved as many problems in a given amount of time, but he loved to ask questions. He was a bit of an oddball,
I love that.
Yeah, and he wanted to know why something was the way it was.
As a tutor, I'm not quite sure how that would fare for me because you're hired to usually help these students excel in test taking. And if the scores don't prove otherwise, I mean, you're not doing your job as a tutor. However, after all these years, I feel like that interviewing that tutor is also a really interesting angle, right? He asked perhaps all the right questions to get where he is. A Fields Medal recipient, June Hall, ladies and gentlemen. All right, let's move on to our second buzzword of the day. Price-conscious consumers flocking to fresh fruit sales amid a 24-year high inflation. That's where we stand.
Office workers and just consumers in general, they cannot get enough of lunch boxes and other processed fresh food items that are about to expire because more and more retail stores are offering these items close to expiring at discounted prices amid the soaring inflation.
It was always a savvy way to get things done because it's
exactly.
not like it went bad. However, more people are seeking it. Okay. So high prices, we got to save where we can. Some companies support employee meals, but some don't. And that's the discrepancy makes it difficult for some workers, I suppose. Daily food costs can be a significant financial burden for workers who don't have options like, I don't know, fancy cafeteria.
Exactly. And many restaurants have been forced to raise the prices because they have been hit by the soaring prices of raw ingredients, including grains and fresh produce. Fruit and fresh vegetables have become so expensive. So for a regular consumer or office workers, it's expensive to purchase these products at supermarkets. But if they're sold for up to 60% cheaper, then that is a very attractive option.
Isn't that a win-win situation? Because ideally, as someone who's selling these close to expired lunchboxes, for example, like they would want to sell it, right?
Exactly. Okay. For convenience stores, they can reduce the cost of inventory disposal.
That's what
consumers, can buy the products for less money. And sales of these discounted products doubled in the month of May compared to January. Doshirak and sandwiches are also popular items at these retail stores and e-commerce sites as well. Demand for ugly produce is also on the rise as well.
Remember when there was like I don't know why, but an overproduction of potatoes, for example, in the country. And one Baekjong-won came out and said, let's sell these ugly potatoes as a well-branded item. Yeah. And it sold because it tastes just as good, guys. And I guess we get it, and now there's a demand for it.
And, the latest food crisis is making me realize we really have to need to come up with creative ways to make food more sustainable.
I bought a little bit of pots of herbs. Now, if I can keep it alive, it would be a wonderful story to this end. All right. I do want to get to this story, so let's. Hyori and Isangsun's brand new cafe had a pretty rocky opening. Criticism, conversation. About it.
Hyori and Isangsun were talking about.
Everything they touch kind of does become a conversation starter.
However, their new cafe has proven to be a little bit too popular among tourists. The cafe caused quite a commotion. And just one day after the cafe officially opened, the couple took to the cafe's official Instagram to apologize and to announce operations adjustments, which is that it's a strictly reservation-only system.
Right.
Because there has been like a long queue outside and, these are tourists. They're excited.
And this is a quiet neighborhood, I think Isangsun's chose specifically. And I'm highlighting Isangsun because this is not even Hyori's pet project. She just happens to be a supportive wife in this case. She showed up on the first day of its opening. It attracted a crowd. You get the gist of it. Her star power is undying. However, I mean, it's a private setting, right? I mean,
people are going about their daily lives. And lo and behold, where did all these people come from?
Right. Yes. So local residents have been disgruntled by the commotion caused by the opening of the star couple's new business venture. That's where the conversation begins.
And some people, including one particular politician, asked, do they really need to own a cafe right here? They have so many competitors who are really struggling with their business right now.
That's a fair point. This is why conversation is still ongoing. But isn't it also fair to ask, that's their thing. I mean, a free market. I mean, you're allowed to open up cafes after getting all the right licenses. However, you can see why the commotion is here to stay. I guess the answer to it, Lee Sang-sun said, they are going to keep a cafe open on a reservation-based system,
right.
But he's not going to be there as frequently as he hoped for.
No.
And neither is Hyori.
No.
Hopefully that should deter the tourists in line. Thank you so much, Erica, for a fun conversation. We'll see you tomorrow.
Day.
If you're listening to our program using the podcast service, just a reminder that we do go live Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. Korea Standard Time. So tune in and help us make the show more informative by giving us your input. See you bright and early on Good Morning Seoul.